Mr. Clark, good morning. How you doing? Everything all right down there? All right. Waiting on Miss Bonner.
Okay, all right, so wait, so. You gonna sit with me today?
No, I turned for some. She was in the queue.
Gotcha. She was in the queue.
She's on the plane, I think, Seattle. Wish I was going.
Yeah, she has. Is it you or me, Miss Bonner?
It's on you, sir.
It's on me. I was informed this morning, and I think some of the rest of you have been informed also, that former commissioner, former board of trustee person, pastor, Reverend Dr. Patney died this morning. So we asked for a moment of silence if we could.
JR had me.
Please bow your heads. Thank you. With that said, we are here for the budget meeting. Mr. Administrator, you ready to go?
Yes, sir.
All right, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Administrator.
All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, Mayor and Commission. Wanted to bring your attention to our response to your request at the last meeting. First, you received a packet to fill tab 8 in your binder under work session. That binder includes both work session presentations, including the one from today, as well as the information that you requested. And this information has also been updated to the website. So it is not only available here, but it's available publicly as well. And so I'll go through the presentation, but the memorandum, and it is the same information. And so we just want to make sure that we over-delivered based on your request. There's a little bit more information, slightly more, in the memorandum than there is in the presentation, but you can follow either as I go through them because they're also in the same sequential order. So one of your, I guess to just bring us back to where we are here, you asked for the variances by department, so I'll go over those in great detail today. You also have given us 4 directives that are included in both the presentation and the memorandum, as well as your insert, just as a reminder and for the public record. Those 4 directives were the full implementation of the Augusta Engineering and Utilities proposed retention initiatives. That has been resolved and it is included. Again, I'll go over those and you'll be able to see exactly where those are in the budget. A reduction in the allocation for the proposed pay and class study from 250 to 75. That also has been resolved. Again, I will go through and show you where those activities are. Third, a full presentation of any variances associated with the FY22 proposed budget by department. That actually begins on page, well, the visual begins on page 3 of the memorandum, and it continues on 3, 4, and 5 with explanations for each individual area. As well as we added in a presentation of the commission directed changes, which you also asked for, that follows that information and continues through the very end of the memorandum. Again, those inserts have been provided to you, and you can actually include the whole punched area in tab 8 when we are finished. The same information is in the presentation, so I'll actually begin by going through those activities. So as we put on these finishing touches for the FY22 budget, that I recommended, the commission has expressed some additional interest in the variances, and so what you have in your binders and what we'll be showing to the public is all of those variance changes that are 3% or greater is also illustrated on the next slide within the general fund, what those allocations go for, what they go to, and a detailed explanation of each. As expressed before. They are increased costs of health care, legislative service requirements like the elections, which we've discussed, or the FY 2021 decisions that impact FY 22 obligations, meaning you make the decision in 22, but as we've talked about, most of these activities happen in perpetuity, so they are incurred in future budgets. If you go to the next slide, there is a visual. I will leave the visual up for the edification of those in the public and those that are in the chamber with us, but I'll actually go through these various adjustments one by one, at least the big picture ones. I'll try to get through all of them, but I want to move quickly for time and if people want to ask questions. So one that was asked about was the mayor's office and that 61.2% increase that you see, which we've talked about multiple times, but I'll repeat it again. The amount from MBK was absorbed into the mayor's budget in 22. The overall program is eliminated. And so those funds simply move into the operating line. Upgrading the part-time position to full-time, that has a total impact on the budget of 6.2%. And again, that is because you are eliminating a program and putting it in the operating budget, and you're increasing someone from part-time to full-time in those benefits. In the administrator's office, the open records role as well as the economic development role are both funded here, and so that is the reason for that increase. What should also be noted there is that the MOU related to while all of the costs are included in the administrator's budget, we actually charge the Augusta Economic Development Authority for the two succeeding years for the cost of that program. So while it looks like an 11% increase, the costs are actually being borne by another entity. When you look at the Board of Elections, of course, you've got the director severance, you've got increased postage related to how our elections are being coordinated with absentee ballots and things of that nature, and the need for new information, adhering to those CDC requirements, as well as moving to the election expenses themselves, that increase in temporary workers as required to be able to deal with COVID, as well as the new state legislated laws related to our elections. In the finance department, I think we've also talked about those three funded positions to help us manage the ARP. The overall initial proposal was to have an office that would manage it. We reduced that based on the feedback of the commission, and so that never made it into the proposed budget. When you look at licensing, there's a new auditor funded by revenue from the returns. So the revenues are actually a net positive versus the expenses. And so those are offset. I wouldn't say that it's a net zero because it's actually a net positive because the revenues increase because of that role. Information technology, of course, the increased licensing and fees for software, which you are aware of and have given consensus for, with human resources, highlighting that change for the pay and class study is illuminated here. When you look at the human resources training, education, and software is included. Employee functions for supplies and materials for new employees. The Employee Incentive Award, for which you gave directives on during FY21 to enhance that program. The tax commissioner made some salary and benefit increases within FY 2021. Of course, those changes roll over to FY22. The Superior Court had a retirement change with the former chief judge, again, in FY21 action. The Civil Court, we have our first judge emeritus, and so we have a new cost there. That is also a legislative change, as some of the others mentioned. In Juvenile Court, again, based on the FY21 state legislation, we now actually pay the full cost for Augusta Circuit judges. It's not split, but we also received the additional $200,000 in revenue, which I highlighted in the first presentation on the Finance Committee. In the public defenders, in juvenile court, of course, those increased salaries, again, legislative. For the backlog, we talked about the 4 new positions funded by the ARP. So again, that's not necessarily against the general fund, but offset by the ARP, but those funds exist within the general fund. The public defender, the increased salaries and the contract labor, again, for the judicial backlog and our response there. Additional security related to the judicial center, the increased salaries and health insurance, those changes. For the coroner, as I highlighted within the last presentation, had increased health issues, deaths, etc. And so those costs have also increased. They are working different hours, so electricity, etc., etc. All of those things are bundled. Emergency management, communication equipment, and hazardous materials have risen. And I'm not going through the percentages because they're on the screen. I'm just highlighting the background information. Highway and Street Administration, the increased salaries and health insurance related to that retention plan. Litter Patrol, the increased salaries and health insurance. Traffic engineering, those same increases. But as you see, the traffic calming devices, I think you gave a directive that you wanted a minimum of 250 and wanted us to look upwards of about 450. I think you actually said 240, and so we allocated 250. Again, a commission directive that occurred in 21, but is actually implemented in 22. Forestry supplies and equipment associated, with the continued maintenance of our environment. Cost allocation, which is the internal service funds required for our cost allocation study on how we allocate our cost and remain in good standing with our audit. So that is the general fund. Again, I went over and read all of those into the record, and of course this presentation is in there, but I'll leave this on the screen for a brief second for our public to be able to see what I just read.
Can I ask a
Moving
question?
forward to the next slide.
Can I ask a question?
I think we got 2 slides. I'll be done. With the Richmond County Sheriff's Office, the same piece, we've already kind of gone over this, but normally in that contingency line, we placed the $3.2 million. It gives the sheriff to be able to allocate and implement that retention plan. That also includes the lap salaries, the pension for the closed plan, and that general contingency line item. And so that is covered there. And that's why you see the increase of the 58% is because it's the $3.2 million from providing the sheriff the retention initiative. So that is the only change there. But when you get to your special revenue funds, it'd be the same thing, but wanted to make sure we provided a condensed report on this in my previous presentation. So I really wanted to make sure we highlighted it in great detail. So when you go to the special revenue portion, again, I'll leave this piece on the screen for our public as I read it in great detail for the public. So these are the variances that have been presented previously, but they're given with more detail than what was provided on the 19th and the 26th. And so, again, going by these activities line by line, you'll see that traffic mitigation is an expanded program to be fully covered by the fees that are charged and is included in the budget. You have the drug court, which is an expanded program funded by projected revenues. Again, what that means, I know the commission understands, but for our public, that just means that the revenues offset the expenses. Same thing for the federal drug forfeitures and the state drug forfeitures, which are both under the sheriff's control. For those who don't know what ARPA means, that's the American Rescue Plan Act. You have to actually record your accepting of the funds, and so that is included in the budget. The nuance that I know the commission remembers, but our public may not, is that we receive a city and county allocation because we are a consolidated government. The Urban Services District, increased use for transit and fire protection. The Convention Center, you have increases to support operating levels and eliminate the current year deficit is included. Your TAD 3, where Augusta reimburses the developer based on the amount of property taxes collected. Of course, you had an increase there, so your reimbursement increases slightly as well, but it also allows you to close out that program quicker. The promotion for Richmond County. Of course, that's our hotel motel tax collection, which passes through the Coliseum Authority and the Augusta Convention and Visitors Bureau. Employee health benefits funds. That's the internal services fund to record those benefits costs. Again, we talked about offsetting those by the American Rescue Plan, so it is not putting that burden on the general fund. The unemployment fund, you know that the state has been a little bit behind there, and so as they increase, those bills are starting to grow, so we are projecting the amount for which we would have to pay that we likely did not have to in 21. And so for the presentation or the visual portion of it, that concludes. But to make sure that you have a full awareness of everything in your binder, if you go to the end of the memorandum, the portion under commission directives, what has also been included is the impact on revenues that the requested changes have. So first you have an accounting of all of the requested adjustments that you asked for, but then you also get to see how revenues were adjusted, because every expense, of course, has to have a matching revenue, and so that is included as well. And so I believe that satisfies the questions and deliverables from the commission from the last meeting in great detail, and I will take any questions that you might have.
Mr. Franny.
The last document you just spoke of, is it this one right here in the last
Yes,
three
sir.
pages?
Mhm.
Okay,
That's
just
right.
making sure. I appreciate that, Minister and Mayor Pro Tem. My question, you said a couple things that on this general fund department variance.
Yes, sir.
I just want to kind of ask a couple questions about it.
Absolutely.
I appreciate the explanation, because I think it's important that we understand kind of why we're increasing, the why behind it, and you explained it well. You mentioned in your office the open records request. Does that mean your office is going to handle all open records requests moving forward, including the mayor's office, to where we don't have?
Centralized.
Huh?
It'll be centralized. There's actually a
Okay.
technology, a software as well that will really do a portion of those activities, but it does not include the sheriff's department. Remember, that
Right.
piece is separate.
Okay. And then on the Board of Election, has there been any talk about Ms. Bailey's retiring? And
Well, and let me make just a clarification, because you asked about that. It would go through, the request would all go through the software, but I guess we don't technically have oversight over the mayor's open records, but he actually asked that it be included in that process. So while I couldn't tell him to do it
Right.
ABC, that's how
Well,
it goes. It's a part of the request, and it's included in the software.
well, and it just sounds like that's a solution, because
That's
he's
right.
been complaining, that
That's
how many he's had to do. So that's a
Yeah.
solution. So that's a good thing.
Yep.
The Board of Election, Ms. Bailey is retiring at the end of the year. Has there been any talk about contracting her services out through the election due to redistricting, due to all the things that are happening in 2022?
Yes, sir. So we've had those conversations. We've had some preliminary conversations, and talked about the vehicle to do that. Again, still in process to do that, so I wouldn't want to put Ms. Bailey's information or that process out into the public at this time.
Totally understand. And then the Finance Department, you talked about them handling the American Rescue funds. Does that mean that these positions go away in a few years?
That's right. Any
Okay.
of those temporary positions, but the commission could keep them if they want to.
Yep.
But the purpose of doing them that way is that they go away. Yes, sir. So we don't carry any additional burden beyond the funds that are allotted to cover them.
Okay. And again, you went through a lot of these that you talked about, like changes in benefit of the salaries that went up. And I think most of them, maybe not the tax committee, but most of them we approved up here. So
That's right.
I appreciate you kind of explaining that again,
Yes,
as
sir.
we know we go through a lot of different aspects. At the current state of where we are in the budget aspect, it's balanced. They're the only way that so we've got the library that has a major deficit. We've got the Canal Authority that we know of. Is there any other departments that have come to you and said, hey, I'm hurting, we need help, that sort of thing?
Well, everybody wants more money.
I know that,
Yeah,
but-
but the dire or the more the areas in which require the most attention would likely be those two. And I think, again, with directives from the commission, there are a couple of ways that you could handle that. So one, you could just simply say, hey, we want you to identify resources and bring it back. I think we've had some conversations related to the Canal Authority, and if it's the will of the commission, then we can carry that. But I would also say, in being fair, and I had a brief conversation with Mr. Sherrouse before, and I mean, when I say brief, I mean 2 minutes. That's not a detailed conversation, and have had some offline conversations about the library. I think there's a balance, and so if the commission asks us to add additional revenues, I think you can do that. But I also think that some of the challenges that you're asking for, you are holding us accountable to manage more effectively in this new environment. And I think, it would be my advisement that we request that of others as well. And so however you ask us to move forward, we would be prepared to make those adjustments. I think both of those could be addressed through rescue plan funds as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that we definitely have to have that conversation. I'm just kind of looking at your guidance on how you'd like to do that.
Yeah.
My final question is the fact that, we hire 17, 18 departments as a body up here. Based on the feedback that you've received from them, is there any, I guess, concerns? Are they pretty much good with what you've presented? Like, what has been the feedback from the department heads? Because I haven't gotten any. And
So I would tell you, I think that the flat budget piece, and I mean, I'm not like trivializing it. I mean, everyone would like to have their budget increased because each of our department heads, at least the 16 that I oversee, are all wanting to give excellent service to our residents. And so that's one area. They want more money to be able to operate. I will tell you that I think the budget is prepared to provide them that opportunity. And one of the things that we're doing that we haven't in the past is we'll be working with GMA and helping our departments develop spending plans, because that's one thing that I think is missing. When are you going to procure? When are you going to hire? Planning your budget so you can also plan to have some cushion in your budget to be able to take on special initiatives and be more responsive. I think when I look at the budget, it is a living, breathing document. You could pass it on the 16th, and those areas that you want to improve and provide additional resources for, you could change it a week later. And so I think my thought would be to look at the budget. If you're 99% happy with it, you would pass it, and then you would say, hey, immediately I want to start working on these areas, and we use the balance of the year or whatever time you give us to make some additional adjustments. That would be my thought.
Yeah, hang on a second, Mr. Attorney. I see you. Did you have something to say?
No.
Well, it's on. Okay.
I get, and
Go ahead.
And in that same vein, like, if there's initiatives that like maybe are not ready for prime time yet, you're saying that basically we can have those discussions into the future, I guess.
Absolutely. I'll give you a great example. I think that the concept around, let's say, the Light Up Augusta piece is one that I think makes sense. I think we all kind of generally say, yeah, let's make sure we handle that infrastructure. Let's make sure we handle the deficit. But are we ready to make this decision now? Do we want to add a third year to replace the deficit since we have the funds for that time to give us enough time to appropriately look at it? Just because you allocate the funds there, that doesn't mean that you have to make a decision on it or even fund it to that level. It means you've allocated those funds now, and this is our plan. But as things change, now we know. And the reason I did the transmittal letter in the way that I did is because now you can forevermore go back and say, hey, I want to adjust this. Here's the map to how we make our adjustments. And so the budget is simply your plan of action, but you can adjust all of those things as you go. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
You good? Anyone else? No one else? Anything you want to add, Mr. Administrator, Mr. Attorney?
Well, I think for me, I know we're not 100% done, but this is the first time I've had an opportunity to work with the commission in this way on such a big endeavor, for all of Augusta. And so I'm really excited that we've made so much progress and gotten your input and that from the public to get us here. So I often don't get a chance to say thank you for that, but I really appreciate all of the leadership and guidance as we continue to go through the budget process.
All right, Ms. Bonner, anything?
No, sir.
Mr. Attorney?
Yeah,
So
Hang on a second. You said what, Mr. Hassan?
yeah. I was trying to say something, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you once again, Mr. Administrator, for your thoroughness in trying to respond with some of the requests that have been put upon you. I know one of the things last time that we was talking about potential 3 meetings, a third meeting if necessary. I personally, think we need one based on what you just said to my colleague, Commissioner Frampton, that after the budget, we could make some necessary adjustments if need be, go ahead and pass the budget and things like that. So that's just my own personal opinion. So I just want to put that out there for my colleagues to take do they think we need a third meeting before the budget cycle? Or do we think we can just let this live and go ahead and deal with the budget?
Yeah.
Because you did ask for a third one if need be, right?
Yeah, if need be. So
and I'm at a point I don't think we need
as
one.
many as you
And so I'm
need,
just asking my colleagues, do we want to vote that up or down or leave it alone?
Well, I think we should leave it to the administrator if he thinks something needs to be done.
Well, so I
But
think
just leave it-
I'm
just leave it
hoping
alone.
that I have presented everything that you need, and if I have, then look, I don't want to work these staff members any more than I have. I had them all here with me till about 8:39 last night, so I know they're tired of looking at me, and my kids would like to look at me. So it's kind of up to the commission. We're at your mercy on this one.
Do I need a vote, Mr. Chairman? I make a motion that we don't have another meeting. We go ahead and take it to the budget.
Hang on a second.
Work session, don't need nothing? Okay.
That work session.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Frandon,
Thank
did you have something?
yeah. So I think for me, I think we're getting to a good place. I guess my caution is that there's 2 major entities that, we're saying we can help, but is there a way to find a solution before the budget? It's the lid's shut on that, and only because they're important entities, and I don't want to think like we're kicking the can down the road as a government. I guess that's my
Yeah,
only.
literally, it's give us the direction on what you would like, and we'll get it resolved. So that is the way to do it. So at this point, I think presented what I am calling the proposed budget. I don't want to call it putting a lid on it, though. I really think if you want to make additional adjustments after the budget is adopted, you are literally just satisfying the state requirements for adopting a budget. But if you wanted to go back and look at the budget and say, hey, we're adopting this budget, but in this work session today, we want you to come back at the first finance committee meeting after the budget is adopted and bring back some solutions and talk to them in between, et cetera, you could do that too. This budget is literally like your monthly budget. You look at it and you assess it periodically, hopefully on a monthly basis, and make whatever directives you want. So if you want us to do it that way, we can,
Yeah.
or if you want us to do something different, we can.
And I think for me personally, I'm fine with not having another meeting if I know that after the budget we're going to continue the conversation. That's it.
So may I make a recommendation?
Hang on
Yeah,
a second.
so-
Let me go to Mr. Clark down at the end. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you. I just have, I know, and this is to the administrator, please. I know that we're talking about 2 entities that we're trying to help, one of them being the Canal Authority. Which is the other?
I heard the
library.
library is one also, the library.
Okay, and I'm total fine with that. So let's add a third one. I would like to help the Augusta Boxing Club
Okay.
with their situations because, I can set up and make a pitch for them, but they do all the talking because they have got such a fine reputation all across the Southeast and the country about the jobs and the programs they do. And when these young men and women go into other cities and represent the city of Augusta, I have heard nothing but positive feedback. And these young men and women need these programs. They need this program. And so let's do everything we can to help get them situated. That's what I ask. That and the other 2 entities, I'm 100% for. Thank
May
you.
I make
Ms.
a
Bonner.
quick recommendation,
Hang on
Mr.
a second.
Chairman?
Ms. Bonner, you said this is a workshop, so we don't need to vote up or down, or,
No, sir, it wasn't advertised as an official meeting, only a work session.
okay,
But however, you can come to consensus among this group, and it'll be recorded as
Okay.
a consensus, but not
so-
an official action.
right, so as a consensus, we don't need another meeting, correct?
I think I got a path forward for you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, so from the feedback that I'm receiving from the commission, it looks as if we're prepared to move forward with the proposed budget towards adoption. But the consensus and the understanding that I'm receiving from the commission is that, and I don't like to call out individual entities, but including those three and others, you are tasking us to come back at the next commission cycle following adoption to provide an update on any areas within the proposed budget that could use adjustments to include them. Is that a fair next step and consensus in what you're asking for, those three entities, and
Yes, sir.
giving the budget an additional look?
Yes, sir. But we don't need to vote on that, do we?
No, it's just for the record
Yeah,
because
just for
now
the record.
that's my assignment to bring that back.
Okay.
Can I pivot for 1 second?
I'm in the queue.
Go ahead.
So my colleague, Commissioner Johnson on the end, and myself are, concerned about how we're going to direct CDBG funds for next year.
Okay.
My question is, can that be done past the budget okay, at any time? Because we really need to give them direction on how to use this money that they're gotten.
Yeah, and so that's a continuous process. So I think you've already approved your CDBG allocation, and so the funding is set, but for their overall plan, you can look at that and make some recommendations, of course, within the federal guidelines.
Of course.
That's very important because some of the things that they do are required by law. And so that might be something that we want to look at in a work session or whatnot, but the funding allocations, which is what's in the budget, totally separate from that
Okay.
piece. But yes, sir.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Question, we just mentioned about the boxing club and some other entities. Are we talking about funding them potentially through the budget, or are we talking about using ARP funds?
So I think you're leaving it open and tasking me with that responsibility to bring it back. Just looking at the ones that you're looking at here, the boxing club, I think we've already gotten started. Again, we getting into the sausage making, but for them, we know that they had an unfinished application for the small business funds that they're eligible for. So we're working through that process now. That should help them close the gap. But then also, if you issue the NOFA and what we've talked about before in issuing the notice of funding availability, they might be able to handle that for their operations. The Canal Authority is a different animal. You would do a direct allocation to them, but ARP funds might be eligible. And so again, just got to give us a little time to look at it. I'm not asking for a ton of time. I think I stated how we would do it, but the mechanisms might be different for all three.
So just to make sure I'm clear on what we're saying, if we do go the ARP route, we decide that it's the ARP route, would it be a direct allocation, or would they have to go through that request for funding process?
Well, and so you're asking me that on the floor. I don't know yet. That's
Okay.
what I'm saying. I have to bring it back. The boxing club, because they're not an entity that is basically a pseudo-governmental entity, they would likely have to apply.
Gotcha.
Whereas the Canal Authority, and again, you're asking me on the fly, so I'm not going to
I
be
got you.
held to
I
this.
got you.
That's for public and private. But, just common sense, pseudo-government, you can do an allocation. None, they would have to go through a competitive process.
And that's just the clarification I was seeking.
Got it.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay. Any others? Going once. Any others? Going twice. Adjourn. Thank you.